Vicki, thank you so much. And as I always say, thank you to PBS NewsHour Classroom for hosting this. This is our third year, or as we like to call it, our third season. We started in the height of COVID. It's still COVID, but in the height of that pandemic, we were all tucked away at home, teaching from home, doing everything from home. And the concerns of teachers have really shifted since then. And this space has become more and more necessary and needed. So I want to thank you. And I want to thank Shivy for being a host tonight with me. This is our first guest host moment. And when Vicki and I were talking about we need to have a guest host, you're the first person I thought of. And I might have texted you like 2 minutes later. And then a minute after that, you were like, I'm in. And I was like, all right, this has to happen. And then everything going on in the news right now and just the state of education, I'm not surprised that so many people signed up to speak with us tonight. So as Vicki said, you're all the guests too. The way these usually work is like Shivy and I are going to talk for a bit. I'm going to ask Shivy some questions. If he wants, he can ask me some questions. We have someone pretty amazing stepping in at around 7:15. Jed Legum, who's reporting, you all might be familiar with, especially this week, from Popular Info. He did a big expose on what's going on with teachers in their libraries in Manatee, Florida. So he's going to hop in at one point too. And everyone wants to talk about this stuff right now, and I'm not surprised why. So Shivy, thank you so much. So this is the first time we met, I think, was probably on Instagram or one of those places. And I got to be a guest. I think I hopped into your Teacher Talk Live one night and then I jumped in another time. And it's so awesome to be able to talk to you again. And we even met in person a couple months ago, which is like a novelty these days. So first of all, just tell everyone, Vicki gave you a great intro, but I'm curious about, you got into teaching. When and why did you find yourself becoming a teacher activist and advocating on behalf of teachers? Like, tell us that kind of origin story.
Yeah. For me, activism has always been a part of my life. Like I remember 1991 marching through the streets of Atlanta, the same streets I marched through today in the name of Rodney King with my father. And so, being raised by a father who was an active NAACP member, Morehouse College graduate, and a former Black Panther, a call and responsibility to show up for our communities was always a mainstay for me. So, as I moved into the education field, it for me, education was like a form of ministry. It was a form of activism in itself. I mean, in the Black Panther Party's 10-point program, the 5th point speaks specifically to education. And for me, I felt that was my calling to arrive from my community. And is why to this day, like I intentionally teach at predominantly Black and brown schools because that is where it is necessary for me to be. To do the work. So in being in this space, you see so many different injustices and systemic issues that if you care, you cannot keep turning a blind eye to it. And for me, when you see that college educated teachers are making on average 35% less than their likewise educated counterparts, you then have to ask the questions as to why. And then when you look at the gender disparity, the fact that education is 80% woman, right? That may have a lot to do with why this field may be undervalued and undercompensated. And as a father, as a man, as a husband, it's hard for me to turn a blind eye to something that is not just impacting me, but impacting so many women and thus impacting the field. And so it's like those type of things that you keep seeing. And then, I'm here in Atlanta, I'm in the South, I'm in Georgia. So I got to deal with, I have to deal with the things that Brian Kemp might want to throw down the way. So it's always something interesting to have to deal with, and how I'm built. I just can't sit back and do nothing. I truly live by the stance that what you do not change, you choose. And I don't choose to stand by and allow these injustices and inequities in education to stand by when I have the opportunity to use my platform to make an impact on it.
Well, thank you, Shivy. And there are some people who are not as outspoken as you or feel comfortable doing that based on where they teach. And I know for a fact that you've become the voice for many educators out there, and therefore their students, with all the work that you've been doing. And, you know, even if it's something as seemingly simple as seemingly simple as wearing one of your sweatshirts and t-shirts that we should drop in the chat so people can check out. That's a form of activism too. And you're giving them words that maybe they don't feel comfortable saying for whatever reason. And so I'm so appreciative of that. And in terms of what's going on, right? I mean, I can speak to you. You want to ask me that question, Shivy?
No, what?
Yeah.
I'm trying to find the questions.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Why don't you, you know what, Shivy, Shivy, do you want to know how I became an activist, a teacher?
No, thank you for the volley. Sorry.
Yeah.
But Sari, like, no, seriously though, because from your position, we all have positions of privilege, right? And you have the opportunity to really not speak up. You have the opportunity to allow things to be. As a white educator, what makes you feel called to show up in spaces where many times people are not willing to take the risk?
Yeah, great question. And it's going to sound trite, but it's some things that sometimes the tritest things are true, right? And it's my students. I'm going to just name it. I grew up in a primarily white, homogenous, middle class, upper middle class town in New Jersey. And I was aware of the inequities, but I didn't experience them firsthand, right? Maybe tangentially with some friends I had, but they grew up in New Jersey, you know, it was different. And I've been teaching at the same school for 21 years, and it's a New York City public school. Kids come from all over the city. And I'm often the only white person in the room. It's become a little more diverse at my school. When I say diverse, I mean really diverse, like not code for Black and brown kids. Like it's gotten more diverse, representing all different people. But when I first started at my school, I was the only white person in the room. And I couldn't help but to just get more and more activated. I mean, I was already like that, but every year working with these young people and hearing their stories and never being able to experience what they experience, but to listen to them and hear them, it got me more and more activated. And then, you know, back in 2015, 2016, well, really starting with, I would say, Michael Brown and all of the beginning of the Black Lives Matter movement for sure. And then going into 2015, 2016, seeing my students' looks in their eyes when they were seeing what was going on the national stage. And I said to myself, I can speak out. I'm protected here. I'm white. I can use my privilege now. And once I started to, I really couldn't look back, and I can't stop. There's times when people say to me, like, you really don't need to be stressing yourself out with all these trolls and people giving me death threats and calling my school, but I just can't stop. And every single time I stand in a classroom and get to teach what teachers in Florida are being outlawed from teaching right now, it makes me just want to keep doing it more and more. So that's how I got here. And I'm not going to stop.
What do you feel, in your opinion, we all do this with some risk. What are some of the things that actually like credibly concern you the most?
You know, if you asked me that, I'm just going to mute some people. if you asked me that before my the January 6th incident, when I learned the hard way not to post myself in my classroom with the words white supremacy versus multiracial democracy on my board, teaching about the January 6th Capitol riots.
Mm.
That definitely the white supremacists didn't like that on Twitter. And they were calling my school and threatening me. I will say I've never been more terrified than like 11 o'clock that night when this one alt-right white supremacist guy tweeted at me with that image. I had a moment of like, oh no, this is not good. After that, I'm numb to it. I'm not as scared anymore because that didn't break me. I felt a little broken that night for sure.
Yeah.
Don't read the comments. I mean, all the anti-Semitic comments that I never wanted to see on Twitter, I saw, but I've become numb to it. So right now at this moment in time, I'm pretty thick-skinned with it,
Yeah.
but they sometimes they get you. It's the comments, the ones that you wouldn't expect. We have Judd in the Zoom right now, and he's going to step in. I'm going to ask him a couple of questions, and then we'll get back to our conversation, Shivy. And I'd love for you to jump in. I know, Shivy, you're familiar with Judd Legum's work. Judd, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I know everyone in this room is just so, I know I can speak for myself, and I'm sure everyone else here is so appreciative for your journalism and the work that you've been doing now that is just so important and also just so enraging to follow about all these different bills and laws targeting teachers, outlawing the work that we do. I'm going to just mute. All right. So Judd, thanks so much for joining us. And if y'all are not familiar with Judd, you can follow him at Judd Legum and his Substack newsletter that is really just filling such a void in the journalism world right now is popular.info, and you can also follow that on Instagram and Twitter. Judd is the founder of Think Progress, and he's been working in politics and journalism for decades, I'd say, not to age you, but right, a decade or two. That's like I like to say about myself. And the reason we're bringing you on tonight is, as you know, our topic is just these attacks on teachers, whether it be curriculum bans, book bans, and then of course the corresponding teacher shortages that should come as no surprise to anyone if they even read one of your pieces this week. So the one thing that we wanted to talk to you about, I know everyone in this room wants to hear more about, and I just saw another piece that you just dropped too, so we could talk about that as well. But a couple of days ago, you dropped a story about what's going on in Manatee County School District. Would you mind debriefing everyone on that story and any updates since you've posted about it?
Yeah, this is a story, I started hearing about it last week, and it really stems from a whole series of new laws that were put in place by the DeSantis administration. I mean, obviously they had to go through the legislature, but DeSantis was out there championing these laws. They're kind of interlocking. They impact each other. And now finally, we're starting to see the real consequences in classrooms. And what I started hearing about first from some activists, but then once I started reaching out from so many teachers and others in the school system, is that they were being told that they needed to make their classroom libraries that were really created through the blood, sweat, and tears of these teachers. Obviously, I'm talking to a group of teachers, so you know how these classroom libraries are created. In Florida, at least from my reporting, they're not given any money for the most part to create these libraries. They're donations. There's books that are coming from home. Some teachers have worked on these for years, curating them, making sure that they have books that are going to engage different kinds of students, different kinds of readers, depending on where they are. what happened is there was a bill passed in March that stated that all library materials had to be vetted, and classroom materials had to be vetted by what they call in Florida a media specialist, a librarian, which on its surface doesn't sound really that strange. But what then happened was they said, and this is later to the Florida Department of Education said, and we are going to, this was in December of this year, consider classroom libraries also libraries. So all of those libraries also, every book in those libraries also has to be vetted. And then there was a training that was put out that all of the librarians in Florida are going to need to take. And that said, again, you are responsible not only for your library, but also for the classroom libraries. And just as a reminder, if there is any materials in these classroom libraries or any library that violates Florida law, including their pornography law, but also other laws, that could be a third-degree felony, and you could be prosecuted for it. Other examples of third-degree felonies in Florida are manslaughter. So you can see that this is not a light threat. This is something where, it's nothing you want to fool around with. It's not a parking ticket. So Manatee County, this is actually going on throughout Florida, but Manatee County was out front on this a bit. And they had a meeting last Wednesday, I've learned, with the principals, where they told the principals that teachers need to make these books inaccessible immediately because there is this legal threat. Now, they didn't really communicate this widely. It was up to the individual principal. So this is still rolling out. When I talked to people, I was trying to confirm all of this last week. A lot of the teachers I talked to said, no, I haven't heard anything. I haven't. So I was thinking, well, maybe there's people got this story wrong. No, it hadn't been communicated because it was going on a school by school level. And then, so what happened is once the word started getting out, teachers began to put blankets over their books, pack them in boxes, cover them with construction paper. And that, really a lot of them, there was a lot of stories of teachers crying while they were doing this, very upset that this was happening to them. And really, feeling like this was a violation. The other part, and I'll just kind of wrap up because I know this is a long answer to your question, but the other thing is this also involves both the Stop Woke Act and the Parental Rights and Education Act, otherwise known as the Don't Say Gay law, because in this teacher training, those two laws, by their explicit text, do not cover libraries. So that means it wouldn't cover the classroom library, it wouldn't cover the main library in the school. But in the media specialist training that was just issued by the state this month doesn't say that. And in fact, it implies very strongly the opposite. It says that there's a lot of similarities between the restrictions on library books and curricular books. And it says that none of the books in the libraries can have unsolicited theories. And then later in the same presentation, it says those unsolicited theories include all the things listed in the Stop Woke Act, which are about, making people feel guilty because of their race and things of that nature. And then also, the issues of that were in the Don't Say Gay bill about not talking about sexual, gender identity and things of that nature. So that's really what's going on. And so there's a real question of, well, when they're making these evaluations, are they going to have to do that or not? I think they're saying err in that presentation. It says err on the side of caution. So if you have a third-degree felony plus err on the side of caution, plus they're making it very vague as to whether these laws apply. If you were someone who was, even mildly risk averse, you can see how a lot of books could be removed in
Right.
this process.
Right. Wow. So both the Don't Say Gay and Stop Woke laws are intersecting here. Is that basically what
Yeah, they both intersect because they are referenced in this media specialist training, and therefore could very well be applied. In fact, we know, and I reported on this a couple of weeks ago, that at least 3 counties, and I'm sure more, but I got public records from 3 counties, they're already removing library books based on the Don't Say Gay bill.
Right.
You know, they're removing And Tango
Right.
Makes 3
Right.
from libraries because they believe it violates that bill. So this is already
Right.
happening, and that was really even before this training was produced.
I'm going to have Jean jump in because Jean is a librarian out of Texas, and I want to hear from her because she's probably experiencing some of this. I hope not, but something like this right now.
Well, quite honestly, my principal, I swear she deserves a gold star for protecting my backside so much. But yes, unfortunately, Texas kind of has to, I don't say has to, but they follow Florida quite religiously. And it scares me. And it scares me because not only did the Florida governor just basically slap in the face African Americans to say that your history is no longer prevalent, relevant, or applicable to Florida state history. And I think about all the Floridians. I think about all of the African Americans and Native Americans who literally turned over their lands to find and support Florida. And now they're being erased. And it scares me because first we were 3/5 to compromise. We weren't a person. Okay. Then it was you're enslaved. You have no right to read. You have no right to speak your language. You have no right to think. Okay, so to speak, until I tell you to think. And then we're going to give you freedom, and we're supposed to give you 40 acres and mule, but we're not going to do that. You have no way to support yourself. You have no economy. We're going to take that away. And then when we tried to run for office in Reconstruction, nay, we're going to change the laws. We're going to put some Jim Crow out there. So it's just a constant repetition of, in various ways with various laws that discriminate and are 100% prejudice, they keep doubling it down. And what frustrates me and what scares me is that the powers that be and the people that can control aren't speaking up. They're not holding these governors accountable. They're letting them abuse the power, and everybody else is squawking. But where is the ethics committees? Where is our legal recourse of checks and balances? No one is doing the checks and balances. We have journalists raising hell. We have librarians raising hell. Teachers are raising hell, but not the right people raising hell. And now I'm concerned because our leadership has run amok. And it scares me because at any point in time, what I said earlier this week, what's going to stop these governors from saying librarians are now a domestic threat? And they're already threatening us with felonies if we put a book on a shelf. So how do I know if I walk into work tomorrow, the 850 books that my legislator said should come off the shelf, am I going to get charged for each one of those books? Am I going to have to face 850 counts of a third-degree felony? What am I, at what point do I become arch enemy number one? And they're going to take my freedom yet again, which I won't even talk about the school to prison pipeline. Now we got it for teachers. We had it for students. We're going to put it for librarians. Like, what are y'all thinking here as far as leadership? And nobody says anything. Nobody has the guts. Not even Texans. Nobody has the guts to get out there and say, no, the buck stops here.
I think
This is enough.
Shivy.
One of the things that we got to pay attention to is that there is recourse, and it's called elections. And the reality is Brian Kemp got elected over Stacey Abrams, right? The truth is DeSantis won his election, right? And they have consequences. And, as somebody who has actually run for public office, like, I'm here to tell you, the notion of, like, if we just get young people to get out and vote, if we just get young people to get out and vote. And when in our eyes, when we think about young people, we're thinking like Gen Z, right? We're like, yeah, those young 20-somethings, those newly 18 just got their voter ID, right? Those kids, right? Yeah, well, let's get them to vote. And it all changed. Now, when I ran for office here in Atlanta, just 2 years ago in 2001, 11% of the electorate was under the age of 45.
Wow.
But when you
45.
have to choose between money and making a living and running
Yeah.
out and voting, you are going to choose to keep a roof over your head before you choose to go out and vote. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but that's the reason why voting, especially in national elections, if not local elections, needs to be a federal holiday. If we can do a
Right.
federal holiday just to
Yep.
celebrate when half of the world was given their independence, because I'm sorry, the slaves were not. It wasn't until, Emancipation Proclamation, and then it getting to Texas 2 years later.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
if we're going to celebrate Independence Day, why not, if this is about freedom and this is about democracy, why not give the freedom and democracy to every citizen to go out and vote without persecution of having to choose between their job,
Right.
a roof over their head, food in their mouth, or going out there and selecting a proper leader?
That
Because
will not-
that's the knee on our neck.
It will
Yeah.
not happen because the odds are not in the favor of the minority of people who are in power when more people vote. So it is absolutely necessary for their political survival to, I mean, and I, like, mind you, I teach high school seniors, right? So like, I gotta literally have that why it's important to vote conversation with 18-year-old kids, 17-year-old, 17-and-a-half-year-old newly registered kids. I have to have this conversation with them all the time. And I have to let them know that, listen, the fact that you even are proposing the argument that your vote doesn't matter proves that the millions and millions and millions of dollars that people on the right side of the aisle spend to make it difficult and arduous and laborious and too much of a pain in the ass to do,
Right.
it's working. And you're showing that it's working. And it is, it's one of those things, like, I agree with you, Sister Miss Jean. Like, I agree with you in the notion that, they've made it very difficult, but at some point, we got to have some accountability. When I say 11% of the electorate was under the age of 45 in Atlanta, like, the response should be nothing other than people need to get off their butt and do what they're supposed to do. Voting does not happen on just one day. There is early voting, there is mail-in ballots, there is a myriad of ways that we can vote, right? They're making it more challenging, but there are many days and many ways.
Yeah, I want to bring Judd back into the conversation, and I hear you, Gene, and I agree. It's frustrating, but we have to. I want to find a way forward here. Judd, you've been involved with politics in multiple different ways. In your experience in interviewing these teachers and administrators dealing with all this right now, and just seeing what's happening on the ground, are you feeling pretty, like, what's your vibe on what's happening? Are you feeling pessimistic about how to get out of this mess, or do you see a path past this in a couple election cycles? Oh, you're on. I'm going to unmute you. You're muted. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry about
That's
that.
it.
I think there's a few things that could happen. One, I've just been, this story that I wrote on Manatee got a fair amount of attention online, and I've really just been overwhelmed by how many teachers are reaching out to me, not just from Florida, but from all around the country with similar stories, not necessarily the classroom libraries and blankets and things like that, but these kind of attacks on them in different ways. I do think, this is something Gene referenced, that many of these actions are illegal. There are very strong protections for not just for public libraries, but for school libraries. And a lot of those restrictions that are being put in place do not, to me, I'm a lawyer, but I don't really practice or anything, but I've studied up on this as I've looked into this, maybe maybe ripe for a legal challenge. That could happen before a couple of election cycles. I know that the ACLU is monitoring it. I know that there are other people who are interested. And so I think that's something that might happen. I don't know, but I think it's something that might happen in Florida. Talking about local elections, one of the things that DeSantis did in Florida, this is playing out in Manatee County, where I focused some of my reporting, but he had 16 board members that he endorsed as governor from around the state. 2 of them are in Manatee and are playing a pretty big role in what's going on there. So that's not something where I think there's a imbalance as far as the political orientation of the folks that are really focusing on these school board elections. I think before the 2022 election, there was, I think late kind of realized that, hey, people are making a big push. There's states like Michigan where the folks who are kind of pushing these restrictions on libraries and things of that nature did not do as well. In Florida, they did very well. So there's different states that have had different reactions to that. But I think really going down to the hyper local school board level where these decisions are being made, that's the kind of race where, you can literally go out and probably shake every person's hand you're going to need to win in that kind of race. I think it's something that is doable politically, especially when this stops being sort of a theoretical discussion about parents' rights, which I think people that's been a nice kind of political rebranding of a form of politics that's been around for quite some time. And you start to see how this is actually implemented, where there really is this kind of demonization of teachers. And I think people generally react pretty negatively to that. I think it's important to remember what's going on in Florida is all based on the false premise that teachers and librarians are using books to groom children or indoctrinate them with leftist ideas. Yeah. And so that's what the basis is. So, that's part of why I'm spending a lot of time on these kind of topics, is I think people need to know not just the catchphrases and how this is being marketed, but how this is really, impacting teachers. Because I think people do understand that teachers have a lot to do. They've got a tough time. They shouldn't really be demonized like this. And so so those are just a few thoughts. But I think the 2 main avenues I see are like the school boards and the courts.
Yeah, I agree. And I really appreciate that you're doing that. I know I tweeted something a couple of weeks ago that blew up because a number of teachers who work in Texas, I won't be too specific because I was too specific in my tweet, mentioned that they've been told not to use the word slavery. Now, by law, they can, but on the ground, that's not what's happening. Right. And I think that's the intention of some of these proposals that don't go through. And so I really appreciate your work in getting on the ground, talking to the teachers, hearing their concerns, because we really need to understand how this impacts the day-to-day, because this is also affecting America's school children. That's who I care about the most right here. I want to know what else is on people's minds right now in terms of what your experience is like. I don't know, Shivy, I don't know if you saw this in the chat earlier, but it looks like Matt, can you jump in and share your story? And I don't know if Shivy saw it, but Jed wasn't here before you mentioned it, but tell us what happened with you with all these crazy laws happening right now.
Hey, everybody. I taught economics and personal finance and contemporary issues to upperclassmen, contemporary issues. And I was dismissed on May the 5th, 2021 for sharing a poem about white privilege by College and A. Lacey and assigning a Ta-Nehisi Coates essay after the January 6th insurrection. And where I wasn't fired under the anti-CRT bill in Tennessee, I was still let go from my job. And it'll be 2 years in May, and it's been a long process.
Are you willing to relocate?
People have asked me that, and I have family here. I've got a little 5-year-old niece, and I've got a sister who's having some health issues. So, it's not something I've really considered yet, or thought about a whole lot. But eventually, I may have to.
My school has openings, Matt, and I would be more than happy than for you to, if you even would ever want to consider it. If you want
to Shivy, yeah.
Area,
awesome.
And we're here in Georgia, but you could teach it dangerous.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's close enough. Yeah, Atlanta's close. It's 5 hours. So, but yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Yeah. I mean that. Okay. Please reach out to me on Instagram and we can talk.
I will, man. Thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, Vicki shared your whole story in the Washington Post. Shivy, that's amazing. I would love to see, fast forward a couple months from now, y'all in your school.
Imagine.
The hallways together. I mean, it's just, you hear this stuff and we know it's happening and it feels surreal until you talk to Matt.
You know what's sad?
It's like, oh, this is some real stuff that this is actually happening. Like, this is happening.
What's crazy about it though is something like that happens to Matt, and we're hearing about it first time, like in community here, right? Yeah. But it's like, I'm gonna be honest with you. Look, I'm here in Georgia, and my classroom, just in the flags that I have around my classroom, right? Black Panther Party flag, RBG flag, everyone is welcome here, Pride flag, Black Lives Matter flags, right? Like all this stuff around my classroom. I teach how I teach live on Instagram all the time for the world to see, right? And it's like, I wish they would. Like, as far as I'm concerned, like, try that with a teacher who has a platform. Yep. Try that with someone who will make you famous. Like, I just, like, I invite the smoke. Like, be careful what you ask for, they say. But I really,
I got some of it. It's okay.
Please.
Yeah, come for me. Like, I think everybody's welcome here in my classroom. Tell me why that's, I mean, there's another story that Vicki and I were talking about yesterday. Is anyone here from Pennsylvania, Bucks County? Is anyone familiar with what's going on there with flags are banned altogether now because all flags because, and this also happens somewhere in Long Island, I believe, where because they've determined that everyone's welcome here flag with all the different Pride, LGBTQ plus colors, is somebody decided that it's anti-police. I don't know where that comes from. They've decided now that flag is not allowed in schools, and then to avoid any kind of drama. Now you can't hang any flags, even like the Ukraine flag, or I guess the US flag, all flags are banned. This is where we're at in America. I mean, some people always say to me, oh, I mean, this is America. It's just a new iteration of it. But someone from Oklahoma's in the room tonight. Would love to hear from you. I think there's so many people talking in the chat. I can't find it. I just saw it. Who is here?
Probably me. It's probably me.
Hey, Stephanie from Oklahoma. Yeah. Tell us your story.
So I actually live in the Oklahoma Panhandle, which is out in the middle of nowhere. There are more cows or pigs than there are people. But I live in a really interesting place. We have a pork processing plant in town, which provides a huge amount of, our economic well-being. But it also means we have an incredibly diverse school district. There are 36 languages and dialects spoken in the Guyman Public School System. You're not going to find out in the middle of nowhere in most places. But I think because I live in the middle of nowhere and people forget that the Panhandle is a part of Oklahoma, I'm a little freer from some of the stupidity, right? But we've got 2 teachers who are in Matt's position right now in the state, who have their certificates are up for review, because they've taught things they shouldn't be teaching. Our new state superintendent, who ran on a platform of stopping indoctrination and wokeness and all that kind of stuff, kind of actually just got his butt handed to him. He went to a budget meeting unprepared, was told by everyone he needed to do his homework, which was entertaining. But I teach a history of religions class. All this spring semester is religion in America. And so we talk about manifest destiny and the myth of American exceptionalism and white supremacy. We read Bobby Jones's White Too Long, the history of white supremacy in American Christianity. But part of the reason I can do that is because most of my parents are Hispanic, and they believe that I'm the professional and I'm the one teaching. And as long as I'm not singling them out or mistreating their kids, they're pretty much going to leave me alone. And I have the support of my admin. They know what I teach. I'm like, guys, this is the book I'm reading from, just so you know. They're like, is it historical? Yes. Can you back it up? Yes. Okay, cool. Have fun. But I also kind of recognize that, I think, again, partly because of where I'm at, out in the middle of nowhere, that's probably a luxury that even a lot of teachers like in Oklahoma City and Tulsa don't get to have.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I'm on the opposite end of the world from Stephanie. I'm in Tulsa, Oklahoma. We were downgraded this year because we have a law last year that was passed, House Bill 1775, that you can't teach anything CRT and in your professional learning, whatever. So Tulsa Public was downgraded at the state board. We're accredited with sufficiencies or something like that. And we also have one of the 2 teachers that Stephanie just mentioned, who did something when he did something, taught something again in a different district, left that district, came to ours, and now his name has been spoken out of our new state superintendent's mouth. The first day that he's on the job, he was telling the world that he was going to take the certificates of this teacher and another one who's no longer in our state. She's in New York right now. She shared the QR code for the New York City Library during Band Week.
That's
summer.
that teacher.
She doesn't even live in there. She's with New York right now, I think. So, but today was his first school board meeting, and he prayed before flag salute the Oklahoma flag, and then prayer. Which, I'm not against prayer, but I'm not for forcing it on anyone. But in my district, we have a superintendent who's very cool and will fly the LGBT flag from our district office. She also, in every video that she's in, she has it right behind her so that all of them everybody who's against that will see that we are for that in Tulsa Public. So we've got our challenges coming. I'm also part of the union. I'm the vice president for our local association. And so we're ready for this teacher to be brought up on whatever docket they want to bring up. But really all he's done is have a difference of opinion with our state superintendent. And so because of that, the superintendent wants to take his license. So we're going to fight, you can't fire someone for a difference of opinion. Let's go through due process, which Matt, who was it that spoke earlier, said that he was going through due process right now. But again, you can't fire for someone. So we have our attorneys ready. The district's attorneys are ready. We're ready for the next step. He was not on the agenda today, although they did take someone's certificate today on the state school board agenda. We don't know why, because they did it in executive session. I think I know why, because I think it's been public, but regardless, they did that during executive session today. So Oklahoma, we're popping.
Yeah, about a couple of years ago, we started seeing these bills getting proposed, passed into laws. It's like the nightmare how a bill becomes a law. And scenario, because now we're seeing, as we predicted, it hurting librarians and hurting teachers in their pockets, right? Like your actual.
Right. And we've got all of those bills coming up, including the one that was mentioned, I think, in the chat about removing federal funding within the next 10 years and all the book bans and the, you can't, today, I think someone filed also Save Men's Sports as because we saved women's sports last year. So we have a newspaper in Oklahoma called The Lost Ogle, who satirically suggested that we should now save men's sports. So someone took them up on it and has done that.
We become a walking onion article.
Yep,
So
it's going to be fun.
Thanks for sharing all that, Leanne. I wanted to bring up something we kind of build that we were going to talk about. And I want to talk to Shivy about this for a second. It's all over the news. College Board's AP African American Studies course. I haven't paid attention the past couple of hours, but the latest is Attorney Crump is suing on behalf of 3 Black young men who are in the AP program. He's suing DeSantis for his banning the curriculum as it stands right now. College Board wrote a letter today to board members, I guess, basically saying that they're still in the process of revision and they're not being influenced by anyone else but whoever has been working on this curriculum in-house. But DeSantis is claiming victory. His comms team basically made it their win yesterday because College Board said they're still revising the course, and DeSantis is claiming it's because of his concerns. Shivy, what are your thoughts on all of this?
So, all right. So here's the funny part about this, right? My aunt is a senior vice president at the College Board. And so I have a little bit of, I was aware of the course.
Yeah.
So I had an opportunity to pilot the course at my school, actually.
Awesome.
And unfortunately, because my school is where it is and we have to focus so many educators towards remediation, we didn't have enough educators to be able to offer this elective, right? So, however, only 60 schools throughout the country had the opportunity to do it, all right? Now, this is a pilot, okay? Right. Which means it ain't final. Right. It was going to be massaged and parsed out and changed and revised anyway. Right. So this is going to happen. There's over 200 individuals who worked on creating this curriculum. So the thing is you expect DeSantis and them to kind of run with it because most people do not understand the process. They do not understand how it goes. In their mind, most people hear, it's a final course and it was a course that is always there. And now he has a problem with it. And now and it ain't that, right? The sad thing is, unfortunately, it is a new course. The sad thing is, unfortunately, it is an elective and not a core course. Right? So that's the truth of it.
It's a semester-long course from what I've heard. It's 4 units. Yeah.
Right. And so they're going to be, if I'm not mistaken, I think February 1st, they're going to be releasing the revised version. Now, my question is, so I kind of think it's a little premature for him to spike the football. I want to see this. Do they remove intersectionality?
Do they remove Black queer people, Black queer activism? Do they remove he didn't what else did he like? He didn't like reparations. He didn't like critiques of the criminal justice system. Now,
so let's see what the revision gives.
I agree. Because he has 6 concerns. If those 6, and also people don't understand, I teach AP US history, right? And so the way their curriculum works, and this is obviously a finalized course, it's been out there for a while. Someone did mention, which is true, that at some point there were some objections when they revised the course in 2015, which was I think a very welcome revision. The course starts with Indigenous people. It didn't before. It started with Columbus, so it was definitely revised in a way that accounted for the new historiography of the last 2 decades, which it hadn't. So it's a much more, I'm going to say it because I want to bring back woke. It's a much more woke course than it was when I first started teaching it, because woke's not a dirty word, and we can have a conversation about that too. they've made it cringe, but it's originally, we'll talk about the purpose of the origins of the word woke. However, someone did mention in the chat, which is true, that there were some people who felt like they erased too much American exceptionalism. They did bring that back into the course. Listen, we're always going to be having history wars over curriculum. But what I do know is that the way the College Board curriculum works is they have suggested topics that can help, that you can use to flesh out the units. But it's up to, they approve your curriculum, they approve your syllabus, but the teachers do have a little bit of flexibility as to what subject matter they're going to teach. But I agree, if intersectionality is X'd out of there and Black queer thought and Black queer studies, then I'm going to have some questions for your aunt. For your aunt.
No, for sure. Because like, I'm honest with you, like I'm pushing my aunt in the back channels like, hey, listen, I heard that you guys were talking about pulling accreditation for some things if a state decided to pull the course. So, my vibe was like, hey, why don't y'all actually use your position, your privilege, and say, hey, I will remove accreditation for all AP courses if you reject this course. Now, I think that's a very good chess move to make, because you would upset a lot of parents who spent a lot of money for their kids to be able to have exposure to college level courses in high school. So, for me, we got to kind of use the tools that we have. Now, could we push an organization like College Board to do such a thing? I think we could. And I think it would honestly be an opportunity for them to kind of put themselves in good graces for teachers who are already trying to get rid of standardized testing.
Yeah, I agree. And they have so much power that I was really hoping, perhaps I was being naive about it, that they would take a stronger stand. But listen, let's see what happens on February 1st. Right? I don't know how are other people feeling about this? Anyone pilot the program here? Our school also was invited to pilot, which I didn't know until today. And I was like, what? I would have loved to teach that, but we didn't have enough teachers. So there's a capacity issue. It's a capacity issue, right? Any teachers, I hope, are any teachers piloting this course in the room tonight, or know anyone who is? Okay.
I don't know if Miss Sid raised her hand and wanted to say something or not.
Sid, jump on in. We have to unmute you.
I'm unmuted. I happened just to look at the Florida State Social Studies standards. Now, standards in states are written through departments of education, and then they are passed by legislatures. They are laws. So following what's in the Florida, you'd be shocked at what I can read to you about what has to be taught about the history of African Americans, including history of African peoples, passage to America, the enslavement experience, abolition, the history and contributions of Americans of the African diaspora to society. Wow. So it's there. Now, for almost every state, I think there are states that don't have standards. I think I remember hearing that Wyoming doesn't, but most states have these standards that are legal. They went through legislatures. If you're teaching something and you can find it in your state standards, I think what I put on the chat to begin with, what's really important is go to the administrator. Stephanie was smart enough to go to the curriculum director for her entire district. And that is rock solid. That means when somebody says, how can you teach about slavery or the Indian removal or anything, Japanese American internment, whatever the hell it is somebody's going after you for, it's probably in your state standards, because they're written generally by educators at the college level, as well as teachers in the classrooms. And I think we should really be aware of the fact that you have some support there, and especially administrators can support you. By the way, the person that they go after is not you, it's your principal, and that person does not have the protections you have. An example, the best middle school principal I ever saw, my grandkids were in that school and they adored this guy, had programs for LGBT kids after school. He got junked from that position where everybody knew he was the best of all of the principals for the middle schools and put in the district office, because we have no assurance that we have a job. I mean, that's, they can even fire you. If, the school board wants to say, forget it, you're out of here, you are. But if you go through your principal, never give out a book list unless the principal has seen it and talked to you. Tell somebody, I'm going to teach this. It's in the state standards. It's in our district curriculum. You got a good row to hoe, but it's going to work. It's going to be helpful.
That's great advice. And I think we always love Sid's advice because she's coming in from, she's a retired longtime principal, among many other administrative roles in education. So it's always good to get that perspective.
Matt, do you feel like your case or your story is being amplified enough?
It was after the after the Washington Post piece came out in December of 2021, and then it's kind of fell off a little bit. I still hear from people from time to time, and I did a documentary with CBS and was on John Oliver, and there's some pretty cool things. And I actually got to talk to Ta-Nehisi Coates. He called me during my appeal, which was that was really, really cool of him. But yeah, I mean, there's always a need for more, not just my story, all of these stories, because in order to make school systems, I guess, maybe feel the pressure, we kind of need to jump up and down on the table and scream and yell and make them, make this as public as possible, because people love teachers. I taught for 16 years, and I like to think that I was an important part of my community. And I had 16 years worth of students come out and support me and say, Coach Hahn was great. We loved his class. He loved everybody. Hey, not that. Sorry, that's my dog, if y'all can hear that. But I forgot where I was there, but
we got
but
all
yeah,
everyone rallying
yeah.
around you.
I had
Yeah.
all the students rallying around me, and all the even parents too. And there were, I appealed on December 14th of 2021 to the school board. There were 300 plus people that showed up to that in support of me. And so, there's a very loud but vocal minority. The students aren't against this. The students want to learn these things, and so
Yeah.
it's really harming them, and that's the worst part of this whole thing.
Thank you, Matt. Sorry to have you
No, it's
relive
okay.
this trauma, but it's important.
No, it's
we
all right.
love you, and I think we want to have concluding thoughts. I'll start, and then I'll toss it to Shivy, and then to be continued. This conversation is just getting started, right? So I want to hone in on what Matt just said there about the national discussion we're having and how we need to refocus the attention on the individual teachers, librarians, school staff members that we're talking about here, because all those forces that have demonized teachers as, I hate saying it, even groomers, they're doing a great job at doing that. And they're taking our humanity away. And I always like to say to people, think about your third grade teacher, fifth grade teacher. I don't know. You had at least one teacher that changed your life in some way. Maybe it was the content they taught you. Maybe it's because they let you sit in their classroom during lunch because you weren't feeling it in the lunchroom. Remember that teacher. These are the teachers, for the most part, that we're talking about here.
Mhm.
These are the alleged groomers, right? I think that's why I love these Zooms that we do, our Educator Voice series. I love the work that PBS Classroom does, and I love the work that Shivy does, because we take that camera that's focusing on some demonized boogeyman that doesn't exist and individualizing it again, and say, I won't name everyone's names in here if you don't want to have your names out there, but that, X, Y, and Z, that's who we're talking about here. And honestly, we did not go into teaching to groom and indoctrinate your kids. We went into teaching for various reasons, I love talking about American history and civil rights, and I love working with young people and opening their minds to stuff. And everyone in this room has a story like that. That's why we went into teaching. And honestly, I can't even indoctrinate them to turn work in on time. I'm still getting essays and the grades are due tomorrow. Like it's absurd to me. I don't even like to speak to that because I don't even want to acknowledge that ridiculous this point that they're making. And that's what we need to start doing. We need to start talking about, like, Matt is not, Matt right here is a human being who wanted to open his young people's minds to another perspective. That's what he was doing. He wasn't trying to hurt anyone, right? He didn't go into teaching to hurt anyone. So that's where I think we need to go here. And if you're all with me, let's keep doing that.
Yeah. No, 100%. I just want to say thank you to PBS. Thank you, Sari, for including me on this conversation. Always including me. Listen, I think we are in a place where we all have something to lose and a whole lot to gain here, where we have a common trajectory. And the truth is that, listen, we just want our kids to be equipped with the truth. We have to ask ourselves why. Like, why is this all happening? I think a lot of it has to do with summer 2020 and the wake of George Floyd, and America seeing many of its white young babies outside advocating for Black lives being considered with full respect and humanity. And I think that triggered a lot of people. And they had to say to themselves, well, who taught them this? We didn't teach them this. Where did it come from? You know what? It had to come from those schools. What they're missing is there is a democratization of thought and the voice of the people through social media. You could whitewash all of history, but you can't whitewash what people share and what people help others to learn. I'm at a place where I just encourage all teachers out there to do it afraid, to do it while risking, to do it while taking chance. But also remember this, there is a 80,000 plus teacher shortage in the country. Go somewhere else. Go somewhere else. There are places throughout this country where you can teach the truth and you can do it the right way. And you can do it how you want to, and it may not be where you are. Sometimes it's just not where you are. And we got to be okay with going to places that we can do it the right way. And I think this is where we are right now.
Thank you, Shivy. I agree with all of that. Vicki, thank you so much for this space, PBS NewsHour Classroom, and especially to everyone who joined in. I think we're popping above 55 people here tonight. I think close to 100 people signed up, which just is a testament to the fact, like I said in the beginning, that we need to be having these conversations. We need to be lifting each other up and helping each other be brave, right? And if you can't be brave, I'll get on Twitter and Instagram, and Shivy will too, and we'll tell your stories, because I'm not scared of it, anyone. I'm in New York City. They can call my principal. The last time they called my principal to complain, everyone was celebrating me because I was speaking out against racist people. They're like, thank you. Like, I was like,
you can give us some teacher street cred if you want to.
Yeah,
Okay?
yeah, seriously. I'm like a hero at my school. Like, thanks everyone. So if you want me to speak out for you, I will gladly do that, because I'll just get more hero credit at my school, right? But yeah, thanks so much for everyone who's joining. And I know we didn't get to speak with everyone tonight. We're so thankful for you all. I'm going to say that we'll do one of these real soon. And Shivy, I love hosting with you. This is fun.
Listen, man,
Can
listen,
we do this again, man? I don't know. I don't think we need to do this again, right?
Even whenever you would like to, I'm more than happy.
What do y'all think? We like Shivy.
And I was being modest. Like, I didn't even hit you with like the sound effects. You know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah. Wait, can you, Vicki, can he just do one sound effect? Can he do one?
Yes, please. You can do more than one. He can do two.
Okay, let's do some, we need some joy right now. We're like, things are getting low. Okay,
Yes.
do it.
Yes. Hold on. I don't even know, like, are you not able to hear my sound effects? Is that what
I think we will. I think if I mute, if we all mute, let's see.
Let's go.
I love that.
Yes. So yes, I would love to have fun with you anytime.